Let me get this straight. Marvel Studios wanted to make a Blade movie featuring a female lead and teach life lessons. Well, they could have contacted me about making an Eternal Night movie, which would have featured a black female lead in an original concept wrapped around vampire lore, which would have taught life lessons, and possibly would have been a far better story than anything they presented as related to the butchering they were going to do to the Blade movie. Now available in paperback and Kindle, Vampires Stalk the Darkness of the Eternal Night. Get your copy of Eternal Night in paperback and Kindle on Amazon.com. Better get the coleslaw, y'all, cause we're having us a barbecue. The more I hear about Marvel Studios' original plans for its Blade reboot, the more I see that this film wouldn't make the cut as a vampire movie in the horror genre. Now, Marvel Studios was planning to do a Blade reboot as part of its Phase 4, and that got delayed and melded into its Phase 5, and as I've learned more about the plans for its Blade reboot, this reboot basically would have crashed and burned from the beginning had they went along with Kevin Feige's original plans to revamp the character that Wesley Snipes defined back in 1998 in his iconic adaptation of the Marvel Comics vampire hunter, Blade. Now, this new version of Blade was originally set to feature Academy Award-winning actor Mahershala Ali taking over the role from Wesley Snipes as Blade. However, Marvel Studios wasn't doing this Academy Award-winning actor any service with the role they were originally planning to write him. Now, the new version of Blade wasn't going to be featuring Mahershala Ali as the Daywalker, being front and center in a world where he was walking the days as a Daywalker and going out here hunting vampires at night the way Wesley Snipes did. No, what Marvel Studios was planning was another bait and switch like they did with many of their Star Wars concepts, like their TV shows like The Mandalorian, and like many of their Marvel movies like Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Multiverse of Madness. So what they were originally planning for the Blade movie wasn't going to have Mahershala Ali out here leading his own movie and being front and center the way Wesley Snipes was. No, what they were planning on doing with this Blade reboot was featuring a female cast and having Blade in as the fourth lead character. Now, this whole plan for Blade being the fourth lead character basically, again, is Marvel Studios looking to not only do a bait and switch like they do with many of their projects, but also going out here and following in the footsteps of the producers of Blade 3, which is also known as Blade Trinity, and going out here and looking to make Blade a background character in his own story. And that's not what people want to see in a Blade movie. No, what most comic fans and fans of the Blade franchise wanted to see was they wanted to see Blade being the lead as the Daywalker, going out here hunting vampires at night, and they wanted to see Blade being the center focus of his own story. But Marvel Studios, because they want to push so-called girl power, wants to go out here and make Blade a movie that's going to be a film that's led by women and teach life lessons, and that runs completely diametrically opposed to what the concept of Blade is all about, and really betrays everything as related to the foundations of its horror themes, because a Blade movie is supposed to be about a man who was born of a mother who was a vampire, and because he was born of a mother who was a vampire, he's a Daywalker by day, and he hunts vampires at night, and his business is very gory and grisly, and what Marvel Studios was planning on was giving us a PG-13 version of Blade, something that would not work with the overall horror themes of the Blade character. Now, what really has me scratching my head about this Blade reboot is the whole idea of making it a female-centered film, because if the lead character of Blade is a man, you would think you would want to make the film focused around that man, because that would make it a Blade movie. Because if you focus the film around all of these women, then it's not a Blade movie. No, it's something completely different. And if you have these women as the lead characters, then the movie is about them and should have a completely different title. And if Marvel Studios wanted to go in that direction, then they shouldn't have named the movie Blade, and they shouldn't have announced it as Blade. No, announce it as an original concept, and go out here and have the backbone and the stones to go out here and take the risk on a brand new concept. That's what I did back in 2020 when I put fingers to the keyboard for an original concept I wanted to do with vampires called Eternal Night. And when I went out here and started putting fingers to the keyboard for Eternal Night, I came up with an original concept with a lead heroine, Lilith Graves, who was going to enter the world of vampires after having her issues with the church. And I created an entire world around a black female lead who was going to enter this world of vampires as she's given this gift of eternal night, and enters this world of getting the gift of eternal night, and is brought into it by a goth singer who is a vampire by night and in disguise, and he's in the goth scene looking for people to prey on. I made an entire story with an original concept with a female lead, and it was a very compelling story that got lots of positive reviews and positive feedback from readers. So I'm wondering why, if Kevin Feige wanted to create an original concept, he could have easily gone to someone like me to craft a script for a story like Eternal Night and said, okay, here's a new character coming to the Marvel Cinematic Universe in a way like that, and it would have been a fresh take that people would have accepted, because they would have said, okay, this is a brand new character and a brand new story, and we understand that it's completely different, and it doesn't have the name of Blade on it, and it can go out here and stand on its own merits. I mean, that is the ethical thing to do with audiences. You don't go out here and mislead people with a bait and switch by putting Blade's name on something that has nothing to do with him. No, you go out here, you create an original concept like I did with Eternal Night back in 2020. Let that concept stand on its own as its own take on vampires and the horror genre, and let that story be its own, and let it be a story that can build its audience organically and fit into the horror genre the way it's supposed to, because horror movies like Blade are supposed to be R-rated. That's what I understood when I was putting fingers to the keyboard for Eternal Night. When I was putting fingers to the keyboard for Eternal Night, I understood that if I'm making a story in the vampire lore, I'm going to be making a story dealing with demons and satanic creatures, and I'm also going to be dealing with a lot of different themes like nudity and adult situations. That's all part of the vampire genre, and it's all part of the horror genre, and all of that, along with the violence and blood and gore, that's going to get you an R rating. But what Kevin Feige wanted to do was he wanted to capitalize on the audience that was out here watching the sparkly vampires on Twilight, and that's why he wanted to create this PG-13 version of Blade and have it out here catering to women and teaching life lessons. When it comes to vampire movies, if you're going to make a movie with a female lead, you're going to be, yes, you can go out here and teach life lessons, but you're going to have to go out here and make that a core theme of the story organically, not go out here and participate in, again, a bait and switch that goes out here and presents people with a story that doesn't stay true to the source material of the character. And after hearing about the horrific plans they had for Blade, I thank God that these plans were basically scrapped, and with the Blade movie, it looked like a complete mess under the original black female screenwriter, who clearly, to me, doesn't understand what the entire concept of Blade was all about, doesn't understand what the vampire lore is all about, doesn't understand the subcultures that Blade would be exploring, like the goth subculture. She didn't understand anything about this, but Kevin Feige went out here and commissioned a screenwriter to write this script, showing me that the incompetence wasn't just the screenwriter, it was Kevin Feige who was incompetent as related to things, because when you have a character like Blade, who is the character who basically revived the entire superhero genre after the disaster known as Batman and Robin tanked it, you needed to go out here and find a competent, qualified writer to go out here and put together the script for a Blade movie that would have paid homage to the 1998 cinematic classic Blade, but also given us a fresh take on vampires and vampire lore. But Kevin Feige didn't want to do that due diligence because he had basically taken his audience for granted. And because he had taken his audience for granted, what he did was go out here and make a Blade remake, which would have basically been a complete disaster. And after the script came back to him, which featured Blade's daughter, I believe, and these female leads and Blade in the background getting such bad backlash, he canceled that script, commissioned another script, before eventually winding up shutting all production down. And thankfully, all of the production was shut down, because this movie would have been an unmitigated disaster, worse than the Marvels will be in a week. I mean, this movie it would have been an unmitigated disaster, because the script coming out for this movie would have laid a rickety foundation that would have basically collapsed the MCU. I mean, I've always said that when it comes to films and comics and any sort of publication, it all starts with the script. And if you can't have a solid script, you're not going to wind up with a finished product that's solid, because if the writer cannot write a good script, you're not going to get a quality film at the end of the day. And when it comes to this Blade reboot, even if you had an Academy Award-winning actor like Mahershala Ali, there clearly wasn't any writer there who had any sort of perspective on the character to present a quality story. And because there was not a writer there who understood the source material and understood the Blade character, understood the vampire genre or the vampire lore, what we got was a complete disaster of a screenplay. And we have Kevin Feige basically spending good money after bad, commissioning multiple scripts, and these scripts cost at least six figures, plus 3 to 5% of the production budget to make. So the original script, basically, that cost them $1 million at minimum, because this was where the film was at $100 million as related to its budget. But now with the newest one, they're having a lower budget, but they're still losing money on commissioning these scripts, because this is all coming out of their production budget, and showing how Kevin Feige is not really doing a good job of managing Marvel Studios, because if you buy scripts and they don't get used, you're taking good money after bad you could use to pay for other things, and showing that he really, as he was out here announcing Phase 5, and Phase 4, he really has lost control over the narrative at Marvel Studios, because this whole Blade situation is a complete debacle, because what he was looking to do was push social justice narratives with using Marvel characters, and even more going out here and participating in the unethical operation of bait and switch, looking to bait people by saying, oh, I'm making a Blade movie. Then, as they come in and spend their money at the theater and introduce them to new characters who just don't even fit the story, and to me, that's disrespectful. No, if you're going out here and you want to do an original concept with women in a vampire story, you do what I did in the SJS Direct universe. I wanted to further expand on the vampires I introduced first in Isis Night of the Vampires, and expanded in Bride of Dracula, and in Isis Escape from Transylvania, and in the upcoming Esteem Horror in the Hamptons. What I wanted to do was lay the foundation for that entire world of vampires, and I did that by putting my fingers to the keyboard for Eternal Night, which features a black female heroine in a vampire story, and features a black female lead in a vampire story against a white male goth musician who is the head vampire. Again, I created an entire story that is out here that features heroines in a vampire story, teaches those so-called life lessons, but keeps it true to the spirit of the entire genre of vampire stories, and would possibly be able to get an R rating with all of the blood and gore and nudity and sex in it. Again, be able to satisfy the viewer with a vampire story featuring a heroine. And yes, it would be a brand new story, but it's a brand new story that can stand on its own merits. In the SJS Direct universe, it can stand on its own merits as its own original story, and it's the kind of story that people have enjoyed as related to the vampire lore in the black fantasy genre. And it wasn't about promoting so-called diversity and inclusion. It was about promoting a black heroine in a vampire story set in black culture and showing that it's possible to tell that kind of story. The same way Wesley Snipes went out here and told that story with Blade, but Kevin Feige doesn't have any faith in the material, so he thinks he needs to bait and switch to create strong women, when I have been writing heroines for years, for over 20 years, and I know that it's possible to write a great story with a heroine in a vampire story and make it lots of fun and make it very entertaining and have that story be able to stand on its own without trying to go out here and bait and switch people the way he did with Blade. And this Blade disaster just shows how bad things are at Marvel Studios, that the studio really is in chaos and crisis, as people have pointed out at Variety. It's in complete chaos because the leadership can't set a direction, and because the leadership was caught up in their emotions about the success they were having with early Marvel Studios movies, they got insecure and started to think they needed to con the customer, when you need to trust the customer. And if your story is good, it will build word of mouth the way Eternal Night did. I mean, if your stories are good, the readers and the viewers are gonna come back. The audience will be back if your story is solid. That's what I learned from going out here and writing Eternal Night, that it is possible to do a story with a black heroine, teach life lessons, and be entertaining in the horror genre, and show you the horrors of not only the vampires, but the horrors of humanity. I mean, Eternal Night has all of that horror and action that people would enjoy in a Blade movie like we got in '98, and give you, again, all of that action in one story. But the whole thing is that Kevin Feige thought he could go out here and pull a fast one on people, and he's now put Blade on a slow track to becoming stranded in development hell. And that's where Blade is right now, where they're still trying to figure out where they want to go. The director walked away because the script was so bad. They've gone through 5 writers at this point, and this whole project really has a foundation that's turning it into a development disaster on the level of Halle Berry's Catwoman in 2004, and this movie will not be a good movie because the leadership is just in a bad place. So when I look at the Blade movie reboot, this reboot is crashing and burning, and it's crashing and burning because Marvel Studios just doesn't know what direction it wants to go in at this point. Now, if you want to pick up my full vampire novel Eternal Night and see a story featuring a black heroine in the world of vampires and learn about the vampire lore of the SJS Direct universe, you can pick up your copy of Eternal Night in paperback and Kindle format. And if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read Eternal Night for free right now. And if you want to get a paperback version of Eternal Night off Amazon.com, you can do that, and you can also get the book at other online booksellers like Walmart, Target, and other paperback sellers who have books at their bookstore. And if you want to pick up some of the other vampire stories on the SJS Direct universe, like the ISIS Night of the Vampires, ISIS Bride of Dracula, ISIS and ISIS Escape from Transylvania, you can find those books in paperback and Kindle format on Amazon.com, and you can find those books at other online booksellers like Smashwords, the iBookstore, Google Play, and Barnes & Noble. And if you want to pick up the newest vampire book, Esteem Horror in the Hamptons, that book will be available in 2024. I'm just waiting for Bill Welko to get back to me with the cover. All the pages have been laid out, and that book is a part of the SJS Direct 2024 catalog. And if you want to see me be able to make more videos taking the MCU to the barbecue and talking about comics, science fiction, and fantasy, you can send a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, ISIS, Bride of Dracula, Goddess Next Door, and John Haynes team up to take on the Dark Vampire in this action-packed ISIS series adventure. Get ISIS, Bride of Dracula in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers today. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Esteem Horror of the Hyena Woman. Hell's aspiring angel takes on a wicked werewolf in this action-packed all-new Esteem series adventure. Get Esteem Horror of the Hyena Woman in paperback and e-readers today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.